Namostute Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pularavinda Yatra Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purna Prajvalito Gyanamaya Pradipaha. Salutations to thee, O Vyasa of profound intellect, and with eyes like the petals of a full-blown lotus, by whom the lamp of knowledge, filled with the oil of the Mahabharata, has been lighted. So Vyasa is acknowledged as the author of the Mahabharata, and so with the meditation on the Gita verses, they acknowledge that he is of profound intellect, etc., etc. Vyasa was actually a character in the Mahabharata. He was the first son of Satyavati by a sage, but it was unacknowledged. She ended up marrying the king of Hastinapur later and having other children. But then Vyasa came in very handy later on in the story because some of those children of hers could not have children for various reasons. So there was this practice back then that some other person in the family, so she called her son Vyasa, and that's how some of the descendants came about. Anyway, that's just your introduction to Vyasa. Okay. Tonight's topic is Arjuna's grief, or grief in general. Last time, we talked about the hero, Arjuna, how he found himself overcome with grief at the prospect of the imminent battle of the Mahabharata. He found himself facing 11 divisions of soldiers, whereas his side had 7 divisions. But that wasn't the problem, because he suddenly realized with a huge jolt that he was expected to kill his elders and his teachers who had been so instrumental in his upbringing. He doesn't talk about killing the Kauravas. He talks about these people who, because of circumstances, allied with his cousins, enemies on the other side, and they were the very ones who taught him the art of archery and war. And so he's resisting, shall we say, this role of his that's come upon him. Now, this realization suddenly pushed aside in his mind the fact that the Pandavas, that is, he and his brothers, had been grossly mistreated over decades by his cousins, the Kauravas, and that they were actually deserving of defeat at the hands of the Pandavas in order to reestablish Dharma. He just pushed aside that whole notion. So anyway, we left the scene where he throws down his bow and refuses to fight, and then Krishna's task is to raise his energy level again to do what needs to be done. So we will try and follow some of the arguments from this standpoint and see what if there's any application in your life or whatever. I'll be saying things. I'll be talking to you. But that actually is talking to myself, because don't you talk to yourself and say you know, I don't know. Anyway, so that's exactly what's going to be happening. But before I start on the topic of grief, I want to do a preliminary sideline, sort of, to sort of set the stage for us. I want to talk about the nature of the world. The Sanskrit word jagat means world or universe. In Indian philosophy, it refers to the entire cosmic order, including all living beings and the elements. In Advaita Vedanta too, Jagat refers to or means the material world. This is contrasted with Brahman, which is considered the supreme reality, infinite and omnipresent. In this context, Jagat is considered an illusion and unreal compared to Brahman. So this is kind of where Advaita Vedanta comes in. In actuality, the world, Jagat, means the changeful, the cosmic flux. And in the Buddhist terminology, they talk about it as momentariness. Things don't last more than seconds. They're constantly changing. And sometimes things seem to repeat, and sometimes they don't repeat. And from the point of view of a person, there's no place to anchor in this world because it's in a constant flow. Now, another word that's used is brihat, and that means something that's the endless extensiveness. There's a third word, loka, that they sometimes translate, or they often translate as world. And loka is, I'm trying to contrast these a little bit because, or I should say, give some idea of the different ways that the world has been approached in Indian psychology, or I should say spirituality. Okay, so loka is a word that can refer to a specific place or a sphere in creation. In some philosophies, it's even regarded as a mental state. And they talk about different classes of beings inhabiting different lokas. Nowadays, in my mind, there are several different lokas. We each experience and we go between different lokas sometimes. Okay, so for instance, the loka of working in a hospital would be different than working in the loka of a factory, would be different than working. You have like a whole different set of terminologies and whatever that goes along with it, or working in a university. These are lokas. They have a certain mindset that goes along with them, and there's sort of an in-group and an out-group, those who are savvy and know what's going on within that, and then those that, the outsiders that don't normally get themselves involved in that particular loka, but then again, they've got their own loka going on somewhere else. So, I mean, there's the loka of being a parent, you can go on and on. And other people who don't have those experiences sometimes have a really hard time understanding or identifying with the mindset of a person in that particular loka. So in Hinduism, one of the sayings is that if you kill someone, you are actually killing an entire world. Hence, Arjuna's hesitation. He's looking at killing off the entire world of his teachers, wiping out like a whole epic of history in his kingdom of Hastinapur. And so, I mean, this is not a small thing. It's very daunting. And so I just want to reiterate that the word loka is generally used for a person's subjective experience of reality, whereas jagat is a reference to the material world that we all know. Water is water, fire is fire, et cetera, things that we can all agree upon, and food is food, et cetera. Now, I'm going to refer back, as I did last time, to some of the things that Swami Sridharananda brought up when he was here almost 20 years ago. And He had some comments about the world, which I thought was very interesting. Jagat, meaning Jagat. The universe, he says, has an intelligence behind it. Even the smallest particle of matter contains an unbelievable amount of energy. We know that, 20th century science. God is not a demonstrable entity, thing, whatever, within the universe. It's just not. It's such a, the word that they use is tattva, or principle, in Hinduism, but it's an abstract. It's the essence of existence. The world cannot be without this idea of being. So each person here is a knower of everything, but who knows you? This is the Vedanta. God saturated the entire universe with his own being, but then who are you? Our task is to perceive the whole universe as a manifestation of the divine. So we're looking at the task of concentrating on the reality, the unity behind the diversity. Convert the whole world into a temple, Sri Dharananda says. It's a joyous adventure of interacting with the divine. God resides in me and in every speck of this world. Fill up the world with the wine of the divine. Another thing he pointed out, which I thought was rather interesting. Try to understand your true original nature, and that is the unified field. But he's referring to the physics theory, the theory of physics. But we're not talking about a theory here, because this is something that practitioners can also actually experience. The task, then, he says, is to start delimiting yourself, getting rid of the limitations. And he looked at the Vedic mantras, the 4 Mahavakyas, thou art that, I am Atma Brahma, all these sayings from the Vedas, and says these, concentrating on these Mahavakyas are one way, or the way, maybe, to start delimiting yourself. Now you can do that. There's a sort of other side to the coin. You delimit yourself, or that is, you get rid of the boundaries, okay? Just automatically by sort of negating them in a sense, or you can undergo the process of extending and expanding your boundaries. So you're coming like this way out, and the boundaries then no longer exist. They just evaporate, okay? And so the important thing is to understand that, well, first of all, nobody's going to hand it to you on a silver platter. Your laboratory is your own personhood, whatever goes along with your mental makeup. This is why it's really important to understand how the mind taken in its huge broad sense, not just the thing that we're used to with all the chatter, but all the other elements that go into mind, memory and intellect and ego and all of that. So we want to identify with our original nature. I love that word, original. It's, this is, the Buddhists took that word and did something with it. We don't use it that much, but it's sort of like, okay, who were you before you were born? This is the idea. What was your original nature? What is, Sri Nisargadatta basically says the birth is, when somebody started giving you names and stuff, consciousness coming as being something specific as opposed to being itself. So, what you think, so you become. Extend the radius of your center to make an infinite circle. In this world, there is no place to anchor. So, anchor in the awareness of the divine. The world promises a lot, but doesn't know how to give. And therefore, don't look to the world to satisfy you. It can't. That's not its role. Why we always think it will is totally inexplicable. Generation after generation after generation, the world is not there to satisfy you. It's not going to. So Swami Vivekananda says, the world is your great gymnasium for practicing, okay? We come here to make ourselves strong. So that gives another, kind of point of view on it. And then also he says, we are all clowns tumbling. So here we are in the world and we're tumbling. And that world you can call a loka, a circus world is a loka. So again, loka is a person's subjective experience of reality. Now, Sri Nisargadatta, who was a 20th century jnani in Bombay, very famous, very well known, he passed away quite a long time ago now, but he says, experience leaves only memories behind and adds to the burden which is heavy enough. You need no more experiences. The past ones are sufficient. And if you feel you need more, look into the hearts of people around you. You will find a variety of experiences which you would not be able to go through even in 1,000 years. Learn from the sorrows of others and save yourself your own. It is not experience that you need, but the freedom from all experience. Don't be greedy for experience. You need none. So here's, back to Arjuna. Here's Arjuna experiencing grief, and various other words can be used to translate the same Sanskrit word. Despondency, sorrow, mourning. This feeling saps our strength, leads to confusion, sadness, denial, shock, even numbness, if it goes far enough, helplessness, depression. It's a downward spiral, okay, just like this. And of course, Krishna understands this, and he's takes it upon himself to try and talk Arjuna out of it. Along with this, there's this agony of indecision. Now, Arjuna is no slouch. He has, in the past, conquered numerous smaller kingdoms in order to bring them into the empire of his brother. He's defeated various foes. Some of them are amazingly weird creatures. He's carried off women to be wives. He's become a eunuch at one point for a year to regain the kingdom during those 13 years of exile when they were not supposed to be discovered. If they discovered, they'd have to go into another 13 years of exile. So he's done all kinds of things, and it's surprising, I'm sure, to Krishna that, like, wow, he's really lost it here. Arjuna is like, this is not like him at all, and it really isn't. But it was a unique situation. He had never faced this situation before. He wasn't concerned about the 11 divisions or whatever of the army facing him. He was concerned about those people who were important in his life. And we can all understand that. People who are important in our life, if they're suddenly gone, it's a huge void. We don't, for quite a while, it takes time, to adjust. And we can't deal with other changing conditions of life if we've just gone through, let's say, a major loss of some sort. So, the root cause of this grief is actually attachment to the way things have been. Mentally, what we do is we take things sort of as they are, but then we project them into an imagined future, thinking it will remain the same. We don't know we're doing this. We're not aware that we're doing this. It's something that the mind pulls on us all. And this gives us then the task as a spiritual aspirant to become aware as step one of what's going on. Now, if you go to the internet, you'll find lots of things about grief counseling and things like that, so I'm not going to belabor all this kind of stuff. But the Gita is, in a sense, the original grief counseling manual. It's a little bizarre if you try and follow it. He doesn't really follow the same, patterns that we would today. Like he tells Arjuna things like, oh, they're going to call you a coward, and all this kind of stuff, and and it just kind of rolls off of Arjuna's back, because they're mundane. That's not getting at the, Krishna knows that too, and all, but what he's doing is he's trying to ultimately get to the real crux of the matter with the spiritual message. So on the ordinary level, there's this model of 5 stages of grief that describe the emotions people experience after a loss. And remember, loss is the key. Denial. Oh no, it didn't. It didn't happen. It's not happened. People do that. You see, in the hospital or whatever, if someone has just passed away. No. It's like, I'm sorry, that's happened. Anger. Then anger. Then bargaining. Well, if I do such and such, maybe I can get something back. It depends on the nature of the loss. Then depression. The bargaining didn't work. Okay, it's not coming back. I'm not getting this thing that I lost back. Okay. And then finally, we get to acceptance. Now, acceptance doesn't mean that we like it. It just means that it doesn't mean that we're okay. It just means that we acknowledge the loss and we learn to live with it and we go on. Accepting the unacceptable was something that was done on a, what can we say, on a scale in Japan after World War II. The emperor, made the announcement when it was clear that Japan had lost, that people had to, accept the unacceptable, the entire nation. Now, as a spiritual aspirant, you can't really, listen, I'm going to tell you, if you want to, you go online, you put in the 5 stages of grief, and they will tell you how to get around it. And there are going to be things like, understand that grief is a process, it can be overwhelming, blah, blah, blah. The thing of it is, you can't really solve a problem, a psycho-spiritual problem, on the same level that it was created. You have to go to a higher level. So this is, let's say, a mental situation, that you're dealing with. you can't solve it on that level. So it's kind of, you can try these things, but in actuality, you need to go to the level of intellect and deal with it there, or higher. You need to go to a spiritual level in order to solve the problems on the mental level. Grief, of course, is a commonplace human response to situations, and it's okay unless it becomes chronic, and then these depressive situations become, kind of permanent, and your whole life is, in a sense, ruined because you have no more joy. Now, and just to explain, these aren't people of high spiritual stature are not immune to loss and grief. Sri Ramakrishna grieved when this young boy died who was related to him. I forget exactly. I think he was like a nephew or something like that. He loved this kid, and the boy died, and Sri Ramakrishna was really, for a while, pretty torn up about it. Okay, mother took him, and all of that. But so what I'm saying is, spiritual people don't get rid of grief. You still experience it. It's just that you're going to deal with it differently, ultimately. Holy Mother also. There were a couple of occasions, more than that. If a direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, she was close to all of them, if one of them passed away, she would grieve. If they were like her children. And there's that one incident where this woman came to her who was grieving for, I can't recall if it was a son or a husband or somebody had died, and the woman was really very, very much in grief, and Holy Mother cried with her. She was like, yeah, this is hard to go through. So grief is normal, and we all have to deal with it. Sometimes it becomes allied to regret, which is a rethinking of the whole thing. Well, if only this had happened, or even remorse. I did or did not do something that might have mitigated this feeling of loss that I'm having now, this feeling of grief that I'm having now. This is what we call, this is an example, there are other examples, of what they call stinking thinking. It's not gonna, you can't rethink what you might have done. You try and live in such a way that you don't have any regrets. You don't have to have remorse later. If you don't want to say to yourself, I should have done, shoulda, coulda, woulda, I should have done such and such. There's no end to this. This is just mental gyration. It doesn't get you anywhere. So we want to prevent that. Chronic grief, when we when we fail to understand and accept that everything constantly changes. What does that mean? What are we doing? We're grasping. We're holding on to it. We're not willing to let it go. If you look at it, okay, here again, if I'm coming from the point of view of people who are doing some amount of meditation and self-examination and whatever like that, if you really look at it and you ask yourself, what have you actually lost? What it is your sense of stability has vanished, along with whatever that person or thing that you lost is. It's that stability. It's like the rug literally being pulled out from under you. This is the critical factor. It's that false sense of stability. If we understand that the world is constantly changing, it's like a kaleidoscope. You see them online now. They're really nice. They've made, they've digitized them. They have some beautiful ones. But even the old-fashioned ones, you have a kaleidoscope. and you just slightly turn it. Well, the world turns, the world turns. So you just slightly turn it, and after it changes. You don't have to turn it very much. Things fall, and the pattern changes, and it's beautiful, and we have a great time watching it as a kid or whatever. But that is a really good example of what the world is all about, because it constantly moves. And it's enjoyable in some ways. The problem comes when we want to hold on to it, and then we feel this huge sense of loss. So let's look at this tendency that we all have to hold on. Attachment to the way things have been, projecting this into an imagined future. We're not even aware that we're doing this. I said this before, but I wanted to repeat it. The task of a spiritual aspirant is to become aware. So for example, even though we see people aging before us, we don't realize that they're only temporarily here, and ourselves as well. We're only temporarily here. This tendency of ours is like, it's one of the things that they call mind-born. It's like a computer program spinning constantly in the background, and we're not even aware of it. It seems to be, built into, the software of the mind that we want to project that things are going to remain the same somehow. But once you are aware, you can control it, not by denying it, but by staring it down. You don't have to argue with your mind. You just let it know that you're watching, and you're going to be aware of the tricks it's going to play. And you do that over a long enough period of time, and it will start behaving. Just because things are this way at this moment, it doesn't mean they'll be this way the next moment. Look, we just had this fire situation. This is disastrous. How many people have lost their homes and their cars and their businesses? And, 4 days ago? Who would have thought? It's just huge. The Buddhists have, in my opinion, have perfected this approach to impermanence. They talk about watching, observing in their meditative practice, the arising and disappearing of these thoughts that tend to try and anchor us in a situation that's unanchorable. There is no anchor in the world. So we're living in this constant flux. We need to get used to it. It's sort of like insects in a gale. They have to get used to the fact that they're living in air that moves constantly, and they have to adjust to that. So we watch the show, and we're free from attachment then from the constant flow of illusions, because those are illusions, those projections that we have, they're just illusions. Not that they stop appearing, but you just don't take them seriously. It's like, okay, I know your tricks, mind. I know. It's in the nature of mind to generate these illusions, but just don't get involved. You'll fall for the false sense of reality over and over, but it will gradually abate. Now, there's a sort of a saying: if you can lose it, then it was never yours in the first place. It's not intrinsically yours. Okay, so that pretty much includes everything experienceable. If it changes, it's not you. So what is the common underlying cause of this feeling? Really, when you're if you're sitting in meditation, it comes down to the discovery that it's embodiment. It's inherent in the fact of being embodied. And by embodied, I mean that you think you're a body-mind. Okay? But you're so much more than that, that the body-mind actually shrinks in importance once you see the bigger picture. So life, in the Indian philosophies, has been labeled dukkha, which is often translated, I should say, as pain, misery, sadness. This is why the Western people used to think that it was a pessimistic philosophy, but it's really quite realistic. I like to use, however, the translation of dukkha as unsatisfactory. Whatever it is, it's just never really going to satisfy us. I mean, there might be there's some degree of enjoyment in the world. There's some degree of the satisfactoriness is momentary, and it goes away. So if you take the long view, that's why you'd say it's unsatisfactory, because it didn't stay, it didn't last, it didn't persist. So, if the first beer was good, the second beer was good, the third beer, maybe not so good. By the time you get to the fourth beer, oh no, enough's enough, too much, or whatever. I mean, it's just, whatever you want to pick up on. Whereas, opposed to this dukkha, bliss is what is to be attained, or joy. This is the essence of Hinduism. But Sridhar Ananda says it was forgotten because they only would talk about the dukkha part. They would only talk about the unsatisfactory part. The thing of it is, the essence of Hinduism is thou art that, and that is is Satchidananda. Ananda is the bliss and joy part, and that's the part that kind of got shoved aside and needs to be drastically revived, which is why Ramakrishna and his whole entourage came to bring that to the fore again. So the concept in Hinduism isn't that necessarily that the world is dukkha, that the world that we have a problem with the world, but it's the ignorance of my true nature that is the cause of this misery. So if we understand or get to the point where we even have just glimpses sometimes of what that underlying reality is, then the hold of this unsatisfactory experience in the world really diminishes, and the joy takes over more and more. I have a quote from Rumi, the Sufi poet from, I think he was like the 1200s. Sorrow prepares you for joy. It violently sweeps everything out of your house so that new joy can find space to enter. Okay, I will have just a kind of a summary quote by Swami, not exactly by Swami Vivekananda, but formulated from a collection of his writings. To summarize, the Bhagavad Gita's fundamental message is disinterested action aimed toward accomplishing one's duty as dictated by time, place, circumstances, and the greater context of one's life. This nishkama karma, which means action lacking desire or expectationless action, is to be realized in a life guided by the motives of the four paths termed yogas. So, for instance, karma yoga, which is the highlight of the Bhagavad Gita. Until the Bhagavad Gita, there wasn't really a karma yoga in the sense that we understand it now. Back then, karma, if they had one, karma yoga would have meant adherence to spiritual acts like doing pujas, doing yagyas, doing homas, doing rituals for a particular purpose. So whether it would be, I have plenty of children, but what I really want is a son, or something like that. So they would do, different yagyas and sacrifices, etc., like that, with a particular motive in mind. But karma yoga, in the sense that it's disinterested action, that was introduced in the Gita. And then Swamiji took that, and as I said last time, repackaged it in new bottle, and put it the wine of the Gita into a new bottle, which is absolutely true. Okay, so karma yoga, work done without consideration for the rewards to be gained. Bhakti yoga, work done as loving sacrifice to a greater ideal. Jnana yoga, life lived discriminating between what is real and lasting and what is false and fleeting. And Raja yoga, which is straight contemplation of the utter singularity of all being and the integral nature of one's own being. So these four yogas, Swamiji, they're all in the Gita, but he expanded them and made them accessible to modern people, and he put it in language that we can understand now. Because some of this is kind of archaic. Some of the what you would call arguments that Krishna gives to Arjuna are a little bit sort of, from our point of view, they don't quite hit the mark. But that's why Swamiji wrote his four great works on the four yogas. So I want to the next topic next time is going to be existential fear. And before I ask for questions, I just wanted to point out that excuse me. There was a question last time, and I thought a little bit more about it, about predestination. And I just wanted to point out that, yes, the text does say, the Lord dwells in the hearts of all beings and makes them whirl around by his Maya as if mounted in a machine. It makes it sound like we're puppets, but in actuality, those people made their choices. You have to know the story of the Mahabharata. How many times the bad guys were given a choice, and they chose the unrighteous course of action. It is their karma, therefore, that put them in this position. And just because God didn't make them do it, he knows that they did it, or were going to do it. He knows that they're going to follow their nature and make the wrong decision. But that doesn't mean he's making them make the wrong decision. Do you understand what I'm saying? If you want to, this is a problem with talking about God in this sense, but we're trying to dispel the notion of predestination in a certain sense. So it's their own karma that put them in this position. The accumulated impetus of their desires to get what they wanted at any cost. And they just consistently kept trying one method after another to force the Pandavas into untenable situations. And ultimately, that cost them their own ignominious defeat. They have doomed themselves. They have predestined themselves, if you want to say. The predestination didn't exist sort of outside of them and was laid on them by some deity. Krishna also directly reminds Arjuna that as an instrument of the divine, he will prevail in the war. And the cosmic plan is to erase the evildoers and re-establish dharma. And consequently, he tells them, and remember, whenever Krishna is telling Arjuna something, he's talking to all of us. Your nature is divine. Thou art born to a divine destiny. And this divine destiny leads to liberation. And also, in the very last chapter, one of the very last verses, he says, fill thy mind with me, be thou my devotee, worship me and bow down to me. Thus thou shalt attain unto me. Yes, thou shalt attain unto me. So, if there are a couple of questions on topic, I will try and do my best with it. Do you have the mic or no? Okay.
Anybody in the room have a question? Leela?
Test.
Okay.
I'm trying to therefore get an equivalence between the idea of experience, Krishna's obviously foreknowledge of the actions of everybody involved, and karma. If whether or not it sounds like Krishna's presense of what was already to happen and what should be, and using that as a convincing tool for Arjuna to continue into the fight, seems to suggest that Arjuna absolutely had no choice, and that would be what Ramakrishna would be suggesting, and that in the end, that is the structure of our relationship.
Yeah, he said your nature will compel you.
Will compel you.
Yeah. You see, he didn't say God will compel you. Your own nature will compel you.
Even if there is a moment when, say, like Duryodhana would have made a slightly different choice, would that still have predestined further action to therefore still pull him back to the path? I mean, the fact is it's being suggested that we might have a choice in deciding our direction of our own karma. So if we do, then we're talking multiple possibilities of universes of how we might be able to make a choice.
Yeah, yeah.
And so if for some incredible draw of what we are confronting in ourselves, of what we consider to be our direction, then if we do make a choice that seems to be opposite of what would be suggested of our karma, does that change anything? And does it?
Well, it might ultimately, but we have tendencies that are always pulling us in a particular direction. Now, let's say you're saying we go against a tendency and we make a proper decision. Okay, the thing of it is you have to do it over and over and over again in order to change the tendency that's underneath, that's underlying the whole situation. Yeah, you can do it. And this is what Krishna had gone to the court in Hastinapur before the war as a peace envoy, and gave some, was looking for a solution to the problem, a war type solution, or diplomatic solution is what we would call it nowadays, a diplomatic mission. Okay, so, and he failed because they had this notion that Krishna was somehow some kind of a trickster. Okay, and they couldn't, and Duryodhana was adamant that he wouldn't give the Pandavas anything, and they were not asking for much at that point. I mean, they just were trying to avoid the war, and he wouldn't give. He actually chose to go to war, in a sense, even though, if you want to say, God himself was coming as the peace envoy. Now, how much more perverse could a mindset be than what Duryodhana had? And that famous quote where he says, I know what's right, but I don't want to do it.
I don't want to do it, yeah.
I don't want to do it. Okay. Well, the thing of it is, we don't want to do a lot of things that are for our own good. We don't want to meditate. It's tough in the beginning to make yourself sit still and just deal with yourself. Nothing else. Just what you have inside. Either what's accumulated through your own life experience, or what was actually put there, by previous generations of your family, whatever. Those things come down to us. History, shall we say, family history. But then also the whole of humanity's background. Because a lot of it is actually now built into the way the mind works. And so the mind sort of, in a sense, comes equipped with a lot of these not only processes, how it works, but also some of the content. It doesn't take that much, because a child is like a vacuum cleaner. Everything that they experience just, So you're as a child, you're pulling in all the good and bad stuff of the whole human race that's available in the surroundings, shall we say, that you're exposed to. So we all have good tendencies and bad tendencies, and it's our choice which to foster. When we become aware and we decide we're gonna follow a spiritual path, which one are we gonna foster? Okay, we're gonna try, and you don't want to hammer on the bad stuff, because that just makes it resist even more, makes the mind resist. But what you want to do is push it aside gently. You don't want to cram it. You just and focus on the positive side. Focus on the good stuff. Focus on trying to find that real nature of yours that underlies all of this myriad mental cogitation that we get sucked into. If we can slow down that process, slow down that whirling mind, so that we can then begin to see here's an example. Begin to see the good stuff that's going to lead us in the right direction. Let's say you have made an appointment with a friend, and you're going to go to a big outdoor venue concert type thing, okay? And there are going to be thousands of people there. But you're going to meet there, okay? Because you're coming from different places, and you maybe haven't seen each other in a long time, but it's a really, really good friend. Now, so you get there, and here you are, you're looking out over this crowd, and there's like thousands of people there. How are you going to find this friend? Let's say the friend told you, I will be wearing a golden outfit. You'll find me because I'm going to be wearing this sparkly golden outfit, okay? So what are you looking for? You're looking for the golden outfit. Everything else fades, right? All those faces, all those whatever, they're there. You can't deny that they're there, but that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for this, and this is exactly what it's like with meditation. All these thoughts come, but that's not what you're interested in. You're interested in the ishtam. That's why they give you an ishtam to concentrate on or recognize give you. That's the friend. That's the one that you're going for. That's the one that you want to meet. That's the one that you're looking forward to. And everything else then just kind of fades away in your attention, in your concentration. And so you don't have to go and like eliminate all those people. No. You've contacted this friend of yours. You see one another. You're like face to face, even though it looks a little. And then in your mind, now we're talking meditation. That golden figure comes. You can bring it closer, 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 closer. Just ignore the fact that all these other things are here.
So it's kind of like the 7 generations of either negative karma or good karma influencing you and your own karmic direction.
Yeah, the thing of it is
you're sifting through it. It's easier to sift through it if you only have 1 generation versus 7 generations where you're literally wading through.
Well, this is just it, though. See, if you kind of dissolve that stuff, you just dissolve it, it goes away in a more natural, easy kind of a way that doesn't create anxieties and all that kind of stuff in you. You don't have to make a big thing of it because you know what you're going for, okay? This is the problem. Most of our literature and whatever often concentrates on how you get rid of the stuff you don't want. Well, that's all well and good, but it shouldn't be that exclusively. It's affirmation that gets you where you want to go. It's the affirmative part. Oh, there's my friend. I see my friend. Okay, we're gonna get together. All right. Okay. Anyway, any other question? Okay, I'm going to do an ending chant. Om Stapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharma swarupine avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namah. We bow to Ramakrishna again and again. Jai Ma.